been was I was at a panel that you did at Family Reunion, and you did it on, I believe you were on the panel and you moderated one similar about having balance in family life, because I know family is a huge part for you as far as who you are, your identity, what you value. And you also have built some pretty phenomenal businesses at the same time, and so you don't buy the lie that one has to be at the expense of the other. So if we can start, I'd love you just to tell these guys a little bit about your background, who you are, and then I've got some questions for you, if that's okay, kind of along those lines.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, and you're right, that is something that is super big for me, and it is a lie, so I'm interested you brought that up. I'm real passionate about that. So, and I'm excited to be here, so thank you for the opportunity. You're one of the best team leaders in all of our entire system. I don't know if people realize that, but you are, so it's always an honor to speak with you, Ben. So my name's Seth Campbell. I've been in real estate now for, I think this is my 7th year since I got a real estate license. I'm just entering my 7th year. I have my world in a snapshot. Married, baby number 4 is coming in about 40 days or so. I got to stop doing that. I said I would stop it too. I don't know what's happening there. But so baby number 4 is coming. And we live in Maryland. I started a real estate team, when I got my license after being a sole agent for a little bit. I have a mega team in Massachusetts. It's about 350 miles away. It's at 7th level. And it does between 100 and 200 transactions every year. Without me, I spend about half an hour a week in that business. Also have started a regional director for Keller Williams Realty for the Maryland and DC region. Have a franchise that we're launching here also, being as the franchise owner, the operating principal. And because I was bored, I started one of these expansion teams with, under Gary's, I've been part of his expansion mastermind group for 2 years. That's very formal, but we were just meeting informally before. And I called 5 Doors, which I'm an owner in, and there's a few other owners around the country, with the intention of, building 400 or 500 teams across the country. So that's kind of my snapshot world.
Awesome. So you don't have a whole lot going on. So knowing that, and your background before, you were in operations management with McDonald's, correct?
Yeah, I actually was, McDonald's was my first job. I was there 16 years old. First job just to buy a car, and then I was out. But I stayed and climbed the ladder and became a regional person for them before I went into real estate.
Okay, so you've got all this on your plate. You've got all these responsibilities. You've got 3 kids on the ground, 1 coming. You've got a wife. You've got your faith. You've got so much going on. So how do you balance all this? Because I know these agents and agents across the country are in a market where it's picking up, it's getting busy. And again, that lie that we talked about is that to get busier, to do more business, it takes more time. How are you able to juggle all these balls and still have quality time with your family?
It's a good question. I think for me, the truth that I really cling to is there was a point where I kind of woke up and said, Donald Trump and all these very wealthy people that are billionaires have the same amount of minutes every day that I have. So what's the difference? And many of them started from scratch like I did. So what's the difference? And the only thing I can find that's different is that they just make different choices. They continue to make different choices every day with their minutes than I did. So then it's a matter of like, okay, how can I make better choices with my time? So I'm obsessed with time, and I view time as an investment. So I even watch my language. Like I said, I spent an hour doing that. No, I invested an hour doing that. And then it's like, okay, well, how was your investment? Was it a wise investment or a bad investment? So I just view time in that sense, that we all have the same amount of minutes. And why do some people have big lives, great family lives, and all of that, and others don't? And it's just about choices with the minutes and then who they get into business with. So for me, I become obsessed with living a life as a priority. And so I kind of, it's one thing Gary Keller taught me is, Seth, you can have these multiple, success is sequential, not simultaneous, but you can have multiple businesses going as long as, you can have multiple boxes is what he would say, as long as you don't live in all the boxes. So I just look at my life as that. So I live in the box of regional director. That's my focus. That's where I spend 99% of my time in the work life. And I have a name attached to every other box. So Charlotte name is attached to the real estate team. A team leader's name is attached to the market center. I have help in the region. So I just put a name in charge of these other boxes, and then I just visit that person. So I invest my minutes into that person. And when it's a great person, it doesn't take a lot of minutes. It can be a 30-minute conversation a week or an hour a week. And if they're a real builder, then it goes. So suddenly, by living in that type of priority, then I can just use like Gary Keller's One Thing book to really narrow down to what's most important inside of each of those boxes. And ironically enough, I have a lot more free time than people realize. It's interesting. Like even with all this stuff going on, like I still take naps in the afternoons sometimes, and it's because I just decide to do what's most important first, and sometimes I don't even do the best.
Okay, good. So as far as your real estate team goes, how many transactions did you guys close last year?
So it depends. Like if you look up in Massachusetts, they're in the 130 range, and then if you go to Five Doors, Maryland, which we're now merging those together, and Five Doors in Maryland was just starting out, so they probably did 30 or 40 transactions last year.
Okay, and you spend how much time per week in that business?
Probably realistically less than like half an hour. Like for a while there was an hour a week, it was half an hour a week, then I just probably went a few weeks without anything. I don't know if that's a healthy answer, but no, it's probably too little now.
Okay, so rewinding from today, going backwards to when you were a solo agent just getting in the business, how much time are we talking, total time to get from brand new agent to where you're sitting today as far as time invested in your business? How long did that take?
So 6 years. So I seventh leveled my team in about 4 years and a few months, 4 years, 5 months or so, from scratch in Massachusetts. And, there's to get there, and then I became a regional director and added on these other things while I do that. Travel and teach. I still do that. That's almost like another job too, traveling to teach, although I keep that at a minimum.
Okay, so how did you start your business off? When you were a single agent, what got you started?
So when I was a single agent, I built my business on prospect or sell by owners and expires. So I'd hit the phones every day and just start building like crazy on that. I got into, I remember going to Camp Pool for free, which was the previous version of Ignite, but we have this Ignite now. And being in the classroom, like 14 people that turned into 8 people, that turned into 4 people, that turned into me and the teacher by the end of the 16 weeks. And I just did the homework. I mean, it sounds revolutionary, but I just went to class and did what they said to do, and I started having success. And then I got a mentor in the office, and that helped me with my first couple of transactions. And he was prospect-based mentor, so helped me with scripts. And I just started bending phones and doing sell by owners expired. Hired my first assistant. I did everything. It's funny, like I used the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book as my model, and many times thought I was smarter than that and would like go a little bit off the model, and it would cost me a lot of money and a lot of time. So that's like outsmarted Gary, and I could get pretty wrong. Even still till today, like even in expansion, I believe I've outsmarted him a couple times just to come back to. You're right, Gary. I lost $20,000 from that. Things like that.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. There's a lot of people laughing not at you, but because they've experienced the same thing. So, question as far as I know, a lot of the agents here, we've got a pretty wide variety in the room. We've got some big teams, and we've got some newly licensed people, and everything in between. So, the question I think a lot of people have is, when did you know it was time to hire your first assistant, and then in what order did you hire people on your team?
All right, so I wanted to hire my first assistant probably after my first closing because I hate paperwork that bad. I was trying to hire her too early, so I hired my sister-in-law. I hired my wife's sister, which probably wasn't the best, and she was really nice, but certainly not an executive assistant. But she was really good He helped me with like my touch programs, put together things. So I hired my first assistant. I hired her probably after, in year one, after like 20 transactions. Towards the end of year one, I think I did about 28 transactions my first year, and I hired her right around there. And then I went and hired a buyer's agent, and then I went and tried to hire a listing specialist. Then I lost my buyer's agent. Then I did that again. I just kept hiring people quickly, out of order, making all kinds of mistakes. Then I lost everybody and started from scratch all over again, like I know some people can relate to. So I just went through that, and finally when, like if I kind of, people ask me like, how'd you do it? The real formula, like the mathematical formula for my success was the Red Book, MREA, and then when I added in RSTLM, Recruit, Select, Train, Lead, Motivate, that was a key piece for me. And I wrapped those two circles in maths coaching, maths mastery coaching. Like, that's it. That's all I needed to do. And when I finally had those three components in place and just focused on those three things, it all started to click. So inside of that, I tried to outsmart it and I screwed it up more ways than you can count. But I finally got back on MRA model, so I got 2 assistants, then a buyer's agent, and I did listings all the way up until, the very end. I got a listing specialist, just before I stepped in public. And early I got a maths coach. I got a maths coach. That was kind of my first feeling when I got a maths coach.
Okay, so how many people currently on your team, Seth?
So now we're a little weird because we're an expansion team. So if we look at Central Campus, we've got administrative support at Central Campus that handle, so a couple of people there, and then somebody in charge of all of that. And then we have the lead generation side of our Central Campus, or the expansion model, we call it a Central Hub. And inside of that, so we've got somebody in charge of lead generation that's on the phones all the time. He also leads 2 other inside sales agents. So they're generating leads, sending appointments for our agents on the ground. And we were in 7 locations, total complicated mess. And we did like 16 versions of lead generation, all at like a D- to an F- level of effectiveness. And then I went and spent a day with Garrett a couple of weeks ago, and he beat me up on that. So we narrowed back down to 2 locations. We're now ready to go back into a 3rd. And so we have a couple of agents in each location. And we simplified our lead generation down to 3 forms of lead generation: sphere, geographic farming, and have met. Now let's turn on geographic farming.
So what were those 3 again?
So we kind of concentric circles. So the center of the circle is sphere of influence. Because I said, somebody asked me a question like, what mistakes had you made? Like, you could do your first team all over again. Like, what did you leave off the table that you should have picked up? And it was real clear to me. I wish I would have done a better job on my database, and I wish I would have gotten into geographic farming. Because when I go back and I study the top 20 agents of this company over 10 years, there's names that make it through every market cycle, through the default cycle, through the seller market, the buyer market. And it is the referral people and the farmers, period. So, and the studies are clear that those are the most profitable businesses. And because I went in cold calling route, and then we went through an REO route, so I started prospecting banks, I did not do a good job in those 2. So the first center circle for us now is sphere of influence geographic farming, like a real field, 32 college, 8x8, all of that. Next circle out is farming, that's geographic farming and demographic farming. So demographic farming might be corporations, businesses, things like that. And then the 3rd circle out from that, which will spend the least amount of money out of those 3 and the least amount of attention, would be all the haven't. So that's cold calling, the ISAs, so expired, and then all the internet leads, Boomtown, all that stuff.
Okay, so knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in hiring your first admin or buyer's agent?
The primary thing I would do differently is I would have learned Recruit Select sooner. I remember being in a mastermind with Gary, and he kept, for like 3 or 4 masterminds in a row with the top 100, he kept beating us up about hiring, about the MRTA, and we're like, Gary, we're tired of this. And he hit us hard. He said one thing that I'll never forget. He said, listen, and we're all stuck along 30 million. He said, you guys are all $60 million producers that hire like a $2 million producer, and you wonder why you're stuck at 30. That you're $60 million producers, you hire like a $2 million thinker, and you wonder why you're stuck at 30. And he's like, when are you guys going to finally go to RSTLM? So we went to Recruit Select, and he said, go to Recruit Select 6 times a year for 3 years and teach it every month. And I'm still on that path. I still teach it every month just to be obedient to that. So the first thing I would do is have a purposeful model for hiring. I mean, it's funny, like, I went, think about it, for Physicals and Expires, I learned scripts, I practiced scripts, I role played, I practiced, I got a coach. But, so I got real purposeful on how to lead generate, but what made me think I would be good at hiring based on my natural tendencies? So then I had to go learn scripts, learn processes, learn models, what questions to ask, what order to ask them, how to read behavioral assessments, all of that. So by far, the primary thing I would do differently is learn Recruit Select at a high level, which would increase my choice, my decision-making skills in hiring. And when I learned how to resource script at a high level, I would increase the quality of candidate I get.
Okay, so now Seth, I know leadership is a huge thing, a huge piece of who you are. It's a huge passion of yours, obviously, by how many times you take Recruit Select. And this was not a pitch from you. I'm just telling the room. I know you're coming to Boise to teach Recruit Select. Is it this summer? October, this fall?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, so hopefully a lot of people in this room are going to go with Marie and I down to see that, because we've taken it multiple times too, and we still learn something every time. But knowing that Recruit Select is a passion of yours because of the leadership component, I know that's a big part of it. I know a lot of agents in this room are thinking, well, yeah, I'm not a regional director, I don't have a team, I'm not a leader. How does leadership, in your opinion, play into the individual agent's business, even if there is no assistant?
Well, I would suggest that everybody's a leader, because you're a leader in your house, or you're a leader in your family, or you're a leader somewhere. Because leadership, John Maxwell says leadership is influence. And I'm pretty sure that everybody in that room is in the business of influence. You might be influencing somebody to hire you to list or hire you to help them find a house, but you are definitely leading and influencing people. If you're a teacher, if you're teaching somebody about this is how the buying or selling process works, guess what? You are leading them in that moment. So for me, I think my advice is that is to look at leadership as a skill. Think of it as a muscle. Just like you can memorize scripts on anything. So many people think of leadership as this big, broad, weird, ambiguous type of thing that you're either born with or not. I can tell you, there are people who are born with a higher propensity for some of those tasks to come naturally. However, leadership is a strategy. It is, when somebody says this, you respond this way. When somebody does this, you lead this way. When somebody's down and up, you say this instead of what comes naturally to you. So those are all things that you can learn from books, from classes, from training. And when you do that, more people will hire you, more people will follow you, and you can build as big of a business or as big of a life as you want. I use my leadership skills just as much or more so at home than I do in the workplace, because I'm more apt to use what comes natural to me at home. And that's when it can get dangerous, because I don't know about your default, mine is usually not that good.
Okay, now, so continuing down this path, I know the one thing has been a huge book for you, as far as I've seen a lot of your videos, and you've integrated into your family the concepts from the one thing as well too. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, well there was that video that became infamous. I had shared with Gary, with my 4-year-old, well he's 3 at the time, he's 4 now, Daniel, my son, who wanted to learn habits, and so he picked a habit of going to bed at 9 o'clock, which I know sounds late, but for us that was early, because he would stay up till like midnight, 1 o'clock, that was crazy, like since he was born, and hated to go to sleep. So we just I let him choose the habit. He learned as a 3-year-old what geometric progression was. He did the X's on the calendar, and the habit locked. It was so funny to watch it when it locked around day 50 or 60. He went to us and says, time to go to bed. So it's funny, like, now that they have the 60-16 calendar, I'm doing one where I'm tracking my food, tracking my food every day because I'm working on nutrition. So he's kind of competitive, even as a 4-year-old. So he's like, Mommy, I need I need X because I need calendar too. So he picked the habit of playing the piano every day. He's at like day 51 right now. We were talking about last night, and he does it on his own now. We used to have to fight with him about playing his piano and practicing. And his teacher is like, what's happening? So it's just fascinating how this stuff works. Like I have a before video of him playing the piano. I can't wait to take an after video because it's unbelievable, and he loves it. So yeah, I'm into building habits, good habits, using the thoughts and methods of the one thing. It's one part of the book that I think that all, and I think that the real lesson for me was that they're never too young. That kids really can understand stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, so outside of RSTLM and the one thing, since we know that we all agree that those are phenomenal tools, what would you say would be one of the most underutilized resources provided to these agents that they or most agents don't use in your experience and what you've seen?
I got to tell you, I think the most underutilized thing in our company right now is mastery coaching. And trust me, I don't get a dollar from that department of this company. So I have no intention of selling maps, but maps mastery coaching changed my life. Like I was able to go from 30 transactions to 101 transactions my second year because of that. And I still have a maps mastery coach till today. I actually paid for 2 accounts mastery. One for all my other businesses, one was regional director, because I invest that much because it makes that big of a difference. I think because it's almost like all the models and all the tools work, but you need that person that can see through your blind spots and point them out to you, and all that does is it shaves off years and years of trial and error and hundreds of thousands of dollars of trial and error. So that's the most underutilized investment we have.
Okay, so now Seth, another comment, because I asked some people yesterday what they really wanted to hear from you. Another comment that I heard a lot was the changes in Craigslist, and I know your team uses Boomtown, uses market leaders. So how have you guys, how has that affected you in your expansion team, in your regular real estate team, whatever frame we want to put around it? How has that impacted you, and what have you done to counter that, or how are you navigating through that change?
Well, first of all, you're asking a question that's probably above my pay grade. I don't know that I have a good answer for that. But maybe my answer will give you a perception as to how my brain works. Is as soon as the Craigslist change happens, which by the way, I still don't know that I fully grasp, but I guess you can put links on there or something. I go to a who. I've trained myself, when I run into a challenge, I go to a who. Not a strategy, not what should I do, how should I do it. I go to a who. So I get on the phone with Devin Doherty, who is former chief technology officer for companies that $50 million IPO, mega agent in Southern California, one of my partners in Five Doors, and say, all right, Mr. Technology, like, what do we do about Craigslist? He gets on the phone with the rest of the group, teaches them what to do. I make a strategic decision in the company. Well, hey guys, we shouldn't be investing our future this much on a haven't met circle anyway with a low conversion point. What would happen if we spent more of that money on our database that we know statistically there's better conversion, and we just make a strategic business decision, invest more dollars in interview on a circle that should have a better return instead of what we thought was the easy road, but really is an expensive road. So I go to a who on technology. I don't know what solution they came up with. I wish I could answer that, but I don't know. I know they did something. They may have gone deeper into SEO optimization, pay-per-click. I don't know. So I couldn't tell you the exact answer, but you can think of my strategy. I go for a who first, and then a strategic option on return on investment.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's a good example. Good example of leverage. So Seth,
around us. There's experts everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've seen good markets, you've seen bad markets, you've weathered the storm, you've built a big business despite the market. You're not a slave to it. So what advice would you give these agents as the market continues to become more robust, it becomes busier? I don't know about where you're at, but we definitely have an inventory shortage in a lot of price ranges. What advice would you give them as far as how to build sustainable growth in this good time to prepare for an inevitable cycle that's coming down the road?
Yeah, that's a good question. By the way, I have never been through a good cycle. I came in right in the middle of the meltdown. So I'm excited about what's happening now. My advice is this, then, because I study the market pretty closely. is I believe, this is my crystal ball, so take it for what it's worth. I believe we're in a W market right now. So it's a little bit of up, down, up, down, up, down. I don't know if you guys are experiencing that. Like suddenly it's an awesome week and there's everything, and the next week we hit the wall. It's like, I don't know what's happening, and it's good again. There's a little bit of that happening around the country. So my advice in a W market is guard your cash. Is now is not the time to allow optimism to creep into your business such that you then start spending money on shiny objects. This is my opinion. I think now is the time to watch your expenses. I would almost go read that first, second chapter of the Shift book all over again, and treat your money as if the market's going down. But so be careful what you spend your money on. Guard your cash. Let your reserves build up. And at the same time, make better decisions with how you spend your money. And for me, my advice to you would be going back to sphere of influence and geographic farming. Make sure that you're investing more there than you are anywhere else.
Perfect, Seth. Well, I think at this point, I'm just going to make sure that we don't have any questions from the group. Want to open it up? Is there anybody that wants to ask Seth something? Yeah, John Thomas.
High C agent. I've been through Recruit Select maps, and obviously I've got the MRA book. Hesitant to actually implement anything. So how do you guard against or prevent analysis of paralysis or paralysis of analysis, and just actually implement what we learn?
It's a great question, and I appreciate that. I'm not wired the same, although I do have a little bit of C, it doesn't go that high. So I can give you my perspective on that. I think number one is there's two ways you've got to control your paradigm and how you look at the world. The first way is, I would say that you've got to address how you look at failure. And if you get yourself to reason that failure is awesome, and when you go back and you study the history of folks that have failed, those who have failed the biggest, lost the most amount of money, tend to be the most successful. So when you look at it that way, and you look at life that way, suddenly you can get yourself to a point where you should be out trying to fail as hard and as fast as you possibly can. You could try to make as many screws as possible such that you learn faster and you get where you can go sooner. So I think you've got to accept that failure is a positive, not a negative. My other mindset is, and how I deal with risk has to do with my spirituality. I'm a Christian, so for me, the way I look at it is I'm already very comfortable with the fact that I will live in eternity in a great place. So whatever happens here is okay. This is just this much of my life. My life will go on forever. So whatever happens here is okay. It's more a matter of the news that I share and the relationships I make. So I could be homeless or I could be rich. None of that really matters to me. So that's just my stance on the world that helps me be okay with risk.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, Seth, we really appreciate you taking this morning the time and investing it in our group, and we thank you for that, and we hope you have a really good day.